Good afternoon everyone, SBG Active Aussie here on this Sunday afternoon. It's about 2:45 p.m. I'm in the highlands of Mount Cootha here in Brisbane. Just thought I'd make a brief video while I'm here. I'm in a more quiet part of the mountain. It gets very busy here on weekends in certain areas. There's a lot of interstate and international tourists. But I've been to this little picnic area before, and there are also a few walking trails like this that lead off it. It's a very beautiful area. What I want to briefly discuss with you is the issue of nostalgia and reminiscing and thinking about the past. I saw a video on a small black pill channel about a week ago. The name escapes me just for now, but this guy was talking about nostalgia and people who like to think about the past or the good old days, as some people like to call them. And I often think about that myself, thinking back to about how the world was back in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, etc. And comparing it to now in 2023, and I know that our world, our society does not remain static. There is always change, but I feel we really can make comparisons between how things were like 25, 30, 40 years ago and to our current society now. We didn't have social media back then. I've spoken about that before. But just generally speaking, technology's changed a lot. Society in general has changed very much. But when I watch these videos about how the world was like several decades ago, especially in cities, like if you see videos of Sydney, New York, London, Singapore, Hong Kong, those sort of places, you really notice a huge difference, especially when you look at street level. So I compare the footage from in the late 70s or early 80s in these places compared to now, and just at street level, it seems to be very sterile, very sanitized, very corporatized. You see a lot of McDonald's, Starbucks, Subway restaurants and brand name fashion outlets. But then you compare the old footage and there were many different types of businesses, and you'd also see people on the street talking to each other, a few people playing basketball. Sometimes you see people reading books. There was a lot more human interaction back in the so-called old days, like back in the 70s, 80s, for example. That's what I think anyway. And in the 90s, I was spending a lot of time in Hong Kong for work and leisure. And when I was back in Hong Kong, the last time I was there, maybe 2015, it just felt totally different to how it was in the 90s. There was just a total lack of character. It was very bland, very soulless, very sanitized, and actually very boring. So you actually couldn't pay me to go to Hong Kong nowadays, apart from the fact that it's under control of the CCP now, and it's just very, very different. But I think, generally speaking, visiting cities nowadays in 2023, it's mostly a waste of time because a lot of them just look exactly the same. So you have sanitized cities, they're very homogenous, they become very boring. And also I've heard some cities being referred to as being the 1% cities. So in the future, only the top 1% of the population in terms of wealth will be allowed to be able to live in these places like New York, Hong Kong, Singapore. They're all very, very expensive, and a lot of the people on lower incomes, even middle incomes, are being pushed out, forced out. So I think that's very sad for those people who've lived in those cities all their life and they grew up in these places, and now they're being forced to leave through no fault of their own. So some smart ass might just say, oh, we'll just become part of the 1 to 5%, but obviously not everybody can do that. We can't all be wealthy and privileged. So we're not all born into wealth. Not all of us have inherited wealth or have the ability to make huge amounts of money. I'm not just talking about people who are well off. I'm talking about people who are very wealthy and need to be to live in certain cities nowadays. So let me know how you feel in regard to that. A lot of birds chirping here. There's a lot of lorikeets. It's really beautiful to come out this time of the year, and it's almost winter now. Maybe I should ask some of these trees how they feel about everything. I know one of my subscribers asked me that, asked the trees for their opinion. I thought that was quite funny. I had a bit of a chuckle about that, but maybe they have a lot of wisdom and we can learn a lot from nature. It's a beautiful afternoon, getting close to 3 p.m. now. There's quite a few walking trails around here. You can walk for kilometres. This is a very big section of forest here, and I prefer it in summer, but it's still beautiful in winter, so it's just a different time of year. But got a lot of native ghost gums and eucalypts in here, and I'm going to take a short when I go back up to the car park because there's some magnificent trees there and they're just massive, just near the road. So I'll do that before I leave. But a lot of people come up here on the weekends and have barbecues. It's just a relaxing place to come out. Anyway, as usual, let me know how you feel about this topic of nostalgia and reminiscing, thinking about the past, and I'll talk to you later.